Hi, Thomas. How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Hi, Ben. I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Well, I'm excited for this episode to get you back on. We're going to cover, well, three things actually related to the same events, which were the giant outages from AWS, and then I think kind of a week later, Azure went down, and then get your perspective on what happened, talk about the financial impact of that and who was affected, and then how do businesses mitigate against these outages? And I've got some good stats that seem to also point to there's kind of getting more of these outages from the hyperscalers, and guess what might be driving that? But yeah, Thomas, how's it going? And then from your perspective, what happened?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Doing well. We're living in interesting times. Looking back at those two outages, I don't think they are related to each other. They were completely independent. One with, of course, AWS. I think October 19, if I remember correctly, and then October 29th, the Azure outage. I only realized it when I went to the post office to return a package, and I couldn't on the Amazon app couldn't pop up the barcode that you scan in order to do the return. So I had to go back home because the app didn't work. That's how I realized it. Yeah, it was a major outage. I think one was 15 hours. That's the AWS one. The other one, roughly 8 hours, if I remember correctly, on Azure, and had huge ripple effects across different industries, across regions, and so on. So I guess, yeah, we'll look at the numbers. Lots of damages and lots of costs involved in all these incidents. But yep, we're living in
Yeah,
interesting times with being dependent on the hyperscalers uptime.
yeah, yeah, totally. And the I saw my with Azure, I saw my email go down. I saw Heathrow Airport's website went down. Just you could just see that if you have just one component of your app or your service that's out on a public cloud and it's not there anymore, then the I saw the term blast radius, but the
Yeah,
impact is just like
yeah,
it just you can't even anticipate what the impact's going to be, right? Should we just share, maybe if I share some of the names of the logo slide that you sent across, Thomas, of who was impacted and then why? I mean, let's just
yeah.
cover what actually caused this.
Yeah. I think these are just some of the brands that were impacted without distinguishing which one was impacted by the Azure or by the AWS outage. But I think what caused the AWS to start there, the AWS outage, to my knowledge, was caused by the DNS file completely wiped out from the Dynamo database. So the DNS, domain name service system, domain name services, is basically where they map your domain name against an IP address. And because of an old file that was introduced, it triggered a cleanup process and wiped out all the DNS instances from the Dynamo database. And that had these huge ripple effects. And you see some of the brands here. McDonald's couldn't take any orders for quite a while. Thank God. They said afterwards, thank God it was a Monday morning. You mentioned the airlines. Alaska Airlines couldn't do any check-ins. DoorDash drivers were stranded because no orders were taken on. And it goes on and on. Starbucks, Apple, Microsoft itself. The
Yeah,
funniest
well,
story I could find was a company called Eight Sleep. I don't know if you know Eight Sleep.
oh, I heard. I don't know, but I did hear about this one. But yeah,
It's
go on. Yeah, tell
the
it, please.
high-end mattresses that do the automatic cooling and the automatic incline and recline. And apparently the story goes when AWS failed, because everything is triggered through AWS. All of a sudden, all these mattresses heated up and basically baked the sleepers. So they all went hot, and whoever had an incline couldn't recline. So they were completely stuck on their mattresses. And the other one I found funny is a company called Litter Robot, which apparently are these automated uh, uh, cat litters that clean itself,
Oh no.
and they failed as well, and
Yeah.
basically got stuck got stuck, and none of these worked anymore with the outages of AWS. I had an interesting experience on myself. I have one of these Ring doorbells, basically,
Yeah,
where
me
you
too.
push the button and the camera goes
Yeah,
on and the doorbell rings. I learned that if you push a button and AWS is down, the doorbell doesn't ring again, because
yeah.
even that goes through AWS. It's just amazing how dependent everything is and how related everything is, and the little instances that go down if we have an outage like that.
Yeah, and look, that's basic change management. When you're talking about, I couldn't believe it when I heard it was DNS. And I guess most people listening to this will know what DNS is. And if you build a website, you have a bunch of DNS records, for example. So my website, bendrakes.com's probably got like 10 DNS records. They look like gobbledygook to a non-technical person. But that's how they've all the internet runs on these DNS records. For that to be the reason, that's what I was shocked by. Was what someone or something, is the AI involved here, changed the records? It's basic change management, right?
Yeah, yeah. Basic change management on the Azure side. I think what I read up is there was a what they call a tenant configuration change, which pushed its AFD, what they call AFD service, the Azure front door service, and that created an avalanche of these ripple effects. So completely different, again, smaller things that happened, hopefully one-time things and no repetition, but small, tiny errors or flaws that bring down, in this case, the entire internet. At least on the AWS side, it only impacted the people who basically point towards the AWS East. They call it the East One server. Nobody else was
Yeah.
impacted. But even that had huge ripple effects for those who completely rely on one region and one cloud provider.
Yeah, it just goes global, doesn't it? Yeah, because yes, it's AWS East. And by the way, when I did some research before you coming on today, Thomas, that's not the first time that they've had a problem with that server. I don't know if that's particularly high demand, how the technology works. Anyone from AWS, by the way, or Azure is welcome to come on the podcast and put us right. But the research I saw, it's not the first time this has happened, which tells me it's not going to be the next, it's not the last time, right? And let's look at let's look at financial impact. And anyone not
Yeah.
seeing the slides, I'll get Thomas to talk through this. But there's some pretty stunning numbers on here, to say the least. And when I was looking at these numbers, Thomas, I was like, yeah, but we probably don't even know the half of the financial impact from this thing. So where did you get your sources from, and what were the data points you came up with on the financial impact?
Yeah, so I looked at, in this case, 4 or 5 different sources. I mentioned 4 here: CyberQ, Parametrics, TechRadar, and Expert Digital. And it's not a clear-cut comparison because, for example, Azure did not publicize their insurance coverage in this incident. AWS did. So what they estimate is the insured losses where the insurance kicks in is between 38 and 581 million. But then these ripple effects come in, right? And that quickly goes up to a total estimate of 650 million. In the case of AWS, again, that was a 15-hour outage. And on the
Yeah,
Azure side, there are no data. I couldn't find any data on the insurance losses, but one of these sources modeled it up and came up with this huge number of 4.8 to 16 billion US dollars in losses through the ripple effects of an 8-hour outage on the Azure side. So, big numbers for one day. Yeah, you can say one day of outage on both sides, although the AWS outage was almost twice as long as
yeah,
the Azure outage.
yeah. So some monster numbers there, and like I say, I don't think we really know. And it's interesting, like you talk about the insurance, and again, the cloud projects I've been involved in over the years. So So if the cloud say you're with one of the big hyperscalers, and most people have got a hyperscaler involved, right? And the service goes down from them, you get credits back against your monthly spend. So that's your monthly spend with the cloud service provider. Note the term credit. Now, the insurance, then your financial impact of, hey, but I lost a bunch of business, my clients left. Coinbase, imagine Coinbase going down for hours, how much business was lost. That needs to be insured against separately, is my understanding of how that works.
That's right. That's right. If you can't place an order on DoorDash, what do? You're not waiting till the service comes back up. You go to the next one, which might be Instacart. In this case, they were also impacted, but there might be another provider who is not on AWS or Azure, and their business still works. So you go there. Once you're there, you might not go back.
Yeah. So you're never going to know the full cost, right? So what might some of the impacts be if we thought about healthcare environments and patients involved? And that was kind of after my shock that this was a DNS config, like we screwed up the change management. My mind quite rapidly went to, well, what happens if I've got a bunch of patients in beds? And what's happening to my remote monitoring? Is that all hooked up to the same platform as my doorbell? It's a shot across the bows here of technology departments and businesses, I guess. Probably it feels like in the same way that if you haven't protected your business against hacks, then it's almost like you're just waiting for the moment where you're going to have a giant problem.
Yeah. So to my understanding, and I was reading up on that, the real mission critical providers, banks, healthcare providers, they mitigate already out of the box against these kind of situations. And we talk about that when we talk about solutions going forward, that comes at a cost, clearly, right? I mean, that comes at a cost, and every business has to make a wise decision. Is it worth it? Or can I live with that kind of a downtime once, who knows, once a quarter, once a year, once in a lifetime? So that's something every business and every industry needs to make a decision on. I mean, the cloud is here to stay. I mean, I'm certainly not going as far to say, oh, everybody back on premise. That's not the option or the solution for that. But there are ways to mitigate and protect yourself against these kind of situations. Again, in the case of AWS, it only the East 1 server farm was impacted. So you could, in theory, have a multi-region setup or even a multi-cloud setup. But again, that comes at a cost, and you need to decide, is this worth my costs or not? I'll give you an example, because we talked yesterday during my power outage here. I have solar, right? I have my roof is covered with solar, but it feeds directly into the grid. I did not purchase a battery with the solar system, because that would be more than double the costs of the entire system.
Yeah.
Meaning, if my utility company, in this case PG&E, has an outage, as they often have here in the Silicon Valley, I'm out. My solar doesn't help me. So is it worth to purchase a battery, buy a battery, so that I'm not suffering through these outages? That's a decision everybody needs to make for him or herself. I decided not to do it because I do not have these kind of mission critical processes. But if I have, you mentioned healthcare, if I would have somebody in the household that is dependent on power, or life is depending on constant power, I would certainly have this battery installed and be not impacted by outages. So it's a very similar principle. I think our power outages didn't go through AWS or Azure. So
exactly.
It's a complete PG&E fault. But one day our water pressure and our power will also go through one of the hyperscalers in order to order functionally.
Yeah, indeed. No, it's actually a very good comparison with power, isn't it? And then I saw that there was kind of rumors on the Twitter sphere that, Amazon put a whole bunch of DevOps people kind of out of work and replaced it with AI. I looked for some hard evidence of that. I couldn't see any hard evidence of that. It looked like it was just a, a good old kind of screw up. And then, but what's undeniable is with AI, the pressure on the hyperscalers now. We know that every week they're announcing new data center builds. And it does make sense that the more pressure that they have, the more volume, the more workloads they have, maybe it starts fraying at the edges and just making it less resilient as a service.
Yeah, I mean, to stop any speculations, right? Because I couldn't find any evidence that those two outages are either related or that the AWS outage has to do with the announcement that they want to lay off 30,000 people in the near future. I don't think there's any relationship to that. As bad as it is by itself to lay off almost, 5% of the workforce because of AI, that's at least the reason out there in public. No, I don't think that has any relationship at the moment to that.
Yeah, yeah, okay, fair enough. And yeah, we've talked about layoffs and as a result of AI, and it's a subject we will keep returning to. So if we talk about, let's move on to, I think it's probably worth saying before we move on to, well, what do businesses do about this? What's the response? Is it, just kind of, we're just going to do nothing and carry on as we are? It's probably worth pointing out that there really are three major hyperscalers out there. And if you look at the stats, AWS are by far the biggest. You've got Microsoft Azure in second place, and then trailing them but gaining in market share, you've got Google Cloud or GCP. So you've got a concentration of risk in itself anyway, just because there's three major cloud providers. Am I right there, Thomas, with your understanding of the market?
Yeah, 100%. Those are the three top ones. And again, coming back to the AI space, looks like in the AI space, we will end up in a similar scenario in the near future where the leading large language models will be led by maybe the same 3 or 4 players out there.
Yeah.
So high concentration of power and high concentration of what basically steers the world and steers the internet.
Yeah, man. So what do businesses do about this, Thomas? I've got some thoughts, but based on my experience, and I'll tell you what, it's my older experience that some of this is the basics, right? But what's your thoughts, Thomas?
Yeah. So I looked up and read up on all the comments on LinkedIn and everywhere else on what is the solution, what do we do in order to avoid similar things in the future. I mean, I worked in a data center for 2 years, way back. When something like that happened, we just went down the basement and replaced the tape or replaced a control unit or anything like that. That's unfortunately not possible anymore because you have these dependencies and hope that the operators on the AWS or Azure side do the fix as quickly as possible. The recommendations are very clear, right? As I mentioned already, one option is multi-cloud, but again, it comes at a cost. You want to replace or replicate your entire stack pointing towards AWS and potentially GCP or Azure. I mean, you're looking at least twice the costs. But then again, there are more ripple effects like adjusting your applications so that they run on 2 different stacks. I mean, it's more than twice the cost for sure to run it in 2 different clouds. So for many businesses, probably cost prohibitive. Same with multi-regions. One recommendation was, replicate the stack and point with the same hyperscaler towards different regions. Even that, I even did a little calculation. So I'll just look at my notes here. I set up an AWS instance, if you're interested in that, with 4 EC2 instances.
Yeah.
So replicating
Yeah.
a small business, maybe a medium, maybe even medium-sized small business, 4 EC2 instances, an RDS database, which is by default what you set up. I calculated roughly 5 terabytes for the data transfer on a monthly basis. Of course, S3 object storage, I calculated 2 terabytes. And then the standard monitoring, backup, and support service. If you are a small business, that costs you roughly $1,200 a month.
Right.
Now, if you replicate that, even with the same hyperscaler, and have it active, it costs you at least double that. So I came up
Double.
with $2,500 a month if you want to replicate it and have it active as a second instance. Again, with the same hyperscaler, meaning you don't have additional costs on the DevOps side or on the application modification side because they run against the same stack. If you do multi-cloud, you have additional costs because you have to adjust your application and you might have to do some other adjustments when you do the data transfers. Now, you can reduce these costs a little bit by having that second instance either as warm standby, what they call warm standby, or cold standby. But the savings are not that much. I mean, it's still, in my calculation, it still doubles the costs. So
Yeah.
that's the question,
Yeah.
right? Is it worth it for, I don't know, a once a year outage to have double the costs? If you're in healthcare or in the banking business, absolutely yes. If you run DoorDash, don't know. I don't know where you draw the line. In addition to that, of course, the recommendations are that you do your what they call the chaos drills, right? You have in your own IT department regular drills. What do you do? What's the failover procedure if something like that happens? If there is one. Well, again, there is this
Yeah.
dependency where you can only do certain things, and other things you have to completely entirely rely on AWS operators. And then, of course, recommendation always revisit your service level agreements, revisit your run book, what they call the run book, and be aware what to do and what you can do and what is under your control if an outage happens. But again, there is really not much more that I'm aware of or I can recommend. And again, looking into multi-region, I'm sure many businesses will do that now, or multi-cloud is a possibility, would have overcome that situation because again, the AWS was only for the east side. If you replicate it on the west side, you're not impacted by the failure. But as I mentioned in this quick small example, comes at a cost.
Yeah. So you've got to have a strategy, which is a process to develop an approach that's going to work for the size of your business, the nature of your business, the criticality of which apps do we need, how many nines do we need in terms of availability on particular apps. And it's almost like also just make sure you're stress testing the hell out of this. Throw problems at it. You can use AWS has got a great tool for stress testing as well. Funnily enough, and AI. There's a bunch of AI tools out there that and this is where AI thinks is really useful to just run across one of these tools across all of your systems and look for where your vulnerabilities are. And then you may have to say, well, we need to build a business case because we've detected that on 10 of our apps, it's fine, but on 2 of our apps, we can't tolerate another outage, which is costing us $10 million an hour. If that's what the impact is. So I think you're right. It depends on scale of the business, doesn't it? But there are options, right?
So there was one other number that I found. The calculated revenue loss across these ripple effects in the case of AWS was roughly $80 million an hour.
An hour.
So again, I mean, it's what people are hopefully aware. It's not they need to be aware of. You're not just outsourcing your hardware to one of these hyperscalers. You're outsourcing your entire business. And that's why you need to be on top of that. You need to look deep into your existing service level agreements. You need to look at the additional costs of the replication efforts that are possible. I'm sure McDonald's and DoorDash and Instacart, and you saw the slide on the brands that are impacted. They will all look into that now and do their math. Is it worth to avoid a future situation like this based on me investing more in these replication efforts? That's up to every business. It's a wake-up call. I mean, it's clearly a wake-up call for every business to look very, very deeply into that. Does Litter Robot with the cat litters do that? I don't know. That's completely up to them. What they do.
The cat, we'll let the cat litter drop out for a few hours. That's fine. The patient's remote monitoring. Hey, maybe we'll take a look at that one, right? And I've got stats here. I was just trying to find them. Yeah. So by hyperscaler, so significant outages I'll just go through each hyperscaler. 2024 for AWS was 7 significant outages in 2024. In 2025, year to date, so let's hope there's no more, but year to date, they're at 9. Azure last year, 2024, was 6. Year to date, 2025, they're at 8. So they've increased. GCP, Google Cloud, 4 last year, 4 so far this year, and Oracle last year, 1, and then this year, 1. So if you look at that, let's just do a little bit of math. About 20, it's already 20% higher this year versus last year. And we got the Christmas
You look
rush
further
and all
back.
that.
That's an interesting stat. Did you look further back beyond 2020? Is that
let's
consistent?
take a look at 2023. And oh, by the way, I'm using Grok. The reason, and as you know, Thomas, I am a Chat GPT guy. Cut me in half. It says Chat GPT. In some Chat GPT, I've moved to Grok and it's been hell moving because Chat GPT 5 has been so slow. And I was one of the top brackets for my subscription. And it's just been terrible. Now, I don't know if that's related to Azure and the outage or whatever, but last 10 days, it's been really slow. What AI are you using? So Grok has just been super fast. And I just use that because it's integrated into X, and I spend a bit of time on X, reading all the excretions on X.
That's interesting because I didn't see any slowdown if I use ChatGPT. For the most part, for whatever reason, I'm using Gemini now. But now and then I go to ChatGPT. Haven't used Grok yet for reasons we talked about in previous podcasts.
Yeah.
So, but as a side note, I mean, of course, we can't do a podcast without mentioning Elon Musk. He was very active during the outages on Twitter, tweeting, of course, why his company might be superior and he might be, I don't know if he positions himself as an alternative for hyperscalers in the near future. But as always,
good question.
He was very active during those outage times.
Yeah. Okay, I've got the data points, and then we'll think about wrapping up because I know we've got time pressures today. 2023. So bear in mind, AWS in 2024 had 7 significant outages, and to date in 2025 they're at 9. In 2023 they had 1. So just like you're talking hundreds of percent increase. Azure went the other way. In 2023, they had 10 significant outages. 2020, so that was in 2023. 2024, they went to 6. Now they're back up to 8. GCP had 1 in 2023. Oracle had 4. So yeah, AWS just something started getting a lot more pressure on it and their system as they went into 2024. Very interesting. Great question to ask.
Yeah, would be, I mean, certainly had to do with the increase in workload, as you mentioned already, right? I mean, I'm sure they have more customers, more clients, more workload since 2023. But the bigger question is the pressure increasing, and these outages, are they avoidable in the near future or not? And we have to live with it. And what does it mean for all the ripple effects, and how do people mitigate now that they had the wake-up calls several times? How to mitigate, and how much money can you spend on mitigating? These are all questions that I don't think there's a generic answer. That's an individual answer for every small, medium-sized, and large business now.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, well, look, Thomas, that's been really good to just review that with you and look at what those mitigation options are. Again, anyone wants to get in touch, just get in touch. Actually, you can go book a discovery call if you want with us now via bendrakes.com. Go see AI Catalyst. It's a new page on the website. All the podcasts are on YouTube if you want to watch them, and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And they're also on the website as well. So, I've been doing some website building. I've been doing building AI agents using Gemini, Google Gemini, and Vertex. I've been getting to know their suite. Really good what Google are doing. Really looks powerful what they're doing after that late start when Sam Altman with OpenAI got the jump on them. Looks really powerful what Google are doing.
Yeah, great. Great. Yeah, thanks, Ben, for inviting me back. I see the
Pleasure.
numbers increasing on subscribers. Can
Yeah,
you
man.
disclose how many subscribers you have on your
I
podcast?
think we're at I think we're now nearly at 31,000. So we're gaining new subscribers every week, every show, which is great. And yeah, we're just trying to bring value to businesses. Thank you very much, Thomas. And I love your new setup there as well. So yeah, looks really good. So
Great.
look, I hope you don't
Yeah.
get any more power outages over there in sunny California or not so sunny California. And I'll see you on the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think our power outages are avoidable. We have to live with it. Now it's fall time where the storms are coming and the rain is coming. We have to deal with it. But yeah, I mean, congratulations to those numbers, Ben. Thanks for inviting me back. If I can help, anytime.
Yeah, cool. Okay, awesome. Links below, everybody. And see you on the next one. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.